I taught my sister's kids, not baby words, because she refused to pay me for babysitting. Last weekend, my sister Amanda, who is 34, asked me to babysit her 2 kids, Mia, who is 5, and Jack, who is 3. Amanda needed someone to watch them while she and her husband attended a wedding. She promised to pay me $150 for the full day. For context, I'm 29, and while I love my niece and nephew, babysitting is not something I jump at the chance to do, especially for an entire day. But I agreed because I could really use the extra cash. The holidays are coming up, and every little bit helps. The day started off well enough. Mia and Jack are energetic, but they're good kids overall. I took them to the park in the morning, which they loved. Mia spent most of her time on the swings, while Jack ran around chasing birds and laughing his little head off. Afterward, we went back to my place, where I made them sandwiches for lunch and set up an arts and crafts activity to keep them entertained. It was a long day, but I kept things under control, even when Jack had a mini meltdown because his glitter glue wasn't working the way he wanted it to. By the time Amanda and her husband returned that evening, I was exhausted but proud of myself for keeping the kids happy and occupied all day. When Amanda walked in, she looked at the kids, thanked me briefly, and handed me a $20 bill. At first, I thought it was a joke. I even laughed a little, waiting for her to pull out the rest of the money. But she just smiled and said, "This is what I can give you for today. I hope you understand." I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what she had just said. $20. After she had promised me $150. I finally managed to say, "Amanda, this isn't even close to what you promised." We agreed on $150. Amanda sighed and gave me this patronizing look. "Michelle, you're family. Family helps each other out without expecting a paycheck. I thought you'd understand that." At that point, I was livid. Babysitting 2 small children for an entire day is no small task, and I had gone above and beyond to make sure Mia and Jack had a great time. But I didn't want to argue in front of the kids, so I just took the $20, forced a tight smile, and left. The entire drive home, I kept replaying the conversation in my head, getting angrier by the minute. I felt disrespected and taken advantage of. Amanda had promised me a specific amount and then had the audacity to guilt-trip me into accepting less because we're family. That night, as I stewed over the situation, I decided that if Amanda was going to treat me like this, I was going to teach her a lesson. So when she called me a couple of weeks later to ask if I could babysit again, I said yes. I didn't even hesitate. But this time, I had a plan. The day of babysitting started off normally. I took Mia and Jack to the park again, and we played games together. They were their usual cheerful selves, completely unaware of what I had in store. After we got home, I decided it was time to get a little creative. During lunch, I casually introduced them to some grown-up words. I didn't make a big deal out of it or frame it as something bad. Instead, I used the words in casual conversation, like I was teaching them new vocabulary. Kids are sponges, and they picked up on it quickly. Mia, being the older and more curious of the two, asked a lot of questions, and I answered them honestly, as though this was the most normal thing in the world. Jack, on the other hand, just repeated whatever I said with glee. As the day went on, I made sure to sprinkle these words into our conversations, ensuring they understood how to use them properly. By the time Amanda came to pick them up, the kids were excited to share everything they had learned. The moment Amanda walked through the door, Mia ran up to her and shouted, "Mommy, Aunt Michelle taught us some funny new words today." Before Amanda could even respond, Jack chimed in with one of the words at full volume. I won't repeat it here, but let's just say it was something you'd never expect to hear from a 3-year-old's mouth. Amanda's face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or scream. She quickly recovered and shot me a glare that could have melted steel. "We'll talk later," she said through gritted teeth, scooping up the kids and ushering them out the door as quickly as possible. So, was I wrong? Did I take things too far? Or was this exactly the wake-up call Amanda needed? Update 1. The next morning, I woke up to the relentless sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. I groggily reached over, my eyes barely open, and squinted at the screen. Amanda's name flashed across it, and I felt a familiar pang of irritation in my chest. I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a friendly call. Still half asleep, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won out, and I swiped to answer. From the second I said, "Hello," Amanda's voice came through like a hurricane. She didn't waste any time on pleasantries. She was furious, her words tumbling over each other in a relentless tirade. She accused me of polluting her children's minds, calling my actions reckless, immature, and deliberately harmful. She spared no detail, recounting how Mia had cheerfully demonstrated her new vocabulary over breakfast and how Jack had enthusiastically repeated his newfound phrases during a grocery store run. According to her, she'd spent the entire evening, and now the morning, trying to undo the damage I had caused. She made it sound as though I had turned her sweet, innocent children into unruly delinquents overnight. Her voice only grew louder as she continued. She told me I'd made her job as a parent infinitely harder and that she didn't know how long it would take to fix this. She painted herself as the victim of an unprovoked attack, and it was clear she wasn't looking for an explanation or apology, she just wanted someone to blame. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, letting her rant without interruption. There was no point trying to reason with her when she was in this state. Finally, when she paused long enough to catch her breath, I seized the opportunity to speak. I calmly told her that I would gladly apologize for my so-called actions the moment she paid me the $130 she still owed me from the first babysitting gig. My tone was level, almost detached, but I knew my words hit their mark. There was a moment of silence on her end, and then she exploded. Amanda's fury reached a new level. She accused me of being selfish and greedy, claiming I was prioritizing money over family. She said I was being petty, vindictive, and completely out of line. But I held my ground. I reminded her that she had broken her promise to pay me fairly and that if she expected me to babysit for free, she should have been honest about it up front. I wasn't going to let her guilt-trip me into thinking I was the bad guy here. Amanda clearly didn't like hearing the truth because, without warning, she hung up on me. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone, half expecting her to call back. When she didn't, I sighed and set the phone down, hoping that was the end of it. But, of course, it wasn't. Later that afternoon, my mom called, and I could tell from the tone of her voice that this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation either. She didn't even ask how I was, she went straight into lecturing me about Amanda's complaints. Apparently, Amanda had wasted no time calling her to complain about my behavior. Mom was disappointed in me, and she made that abundantly clear. She told me I should know better than to teach children inappropriate language and accused me of being petty and spiteful. Then she brought up Amanda's plate, emphasizing how much Amanda had to deal with and how I should be more understanding. It was the same narrative Amanda had pushed, just repackaged in my mom's voice. I could feel my frustration rising with every word she said, but I held back from interrupting her. When she was done, I asked her one simple question: why was Amanda's plate my responsibility? That seemed to catch her off guard because there was a moment of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to come up with a response. Finally, she said that family shouldn't fight over money and that I should just let it go for the sake of keeping the peace. Her words felt like a dismissal, like she was saying my feelings didn't matter because family was more important. I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with her, so I ended the call as politely as I could, but my frustration lingered. By the time evening rolled around, I thought I'd finally have some peace, but that illusion was shattered when there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to see Amanda's husband, Dave, standing there when I opened it. He looked serious, like he had come on some kind of mission. Without waiting for an invitation, he stepped inside and launched into what I could only describe as a rehearsed speech. He said he was here to reason with me and hoped we could resolve the issue like adults. He explained that they had faced some unexpected expenses recently and simply couldn't afford to pay me the full amount from the first babysitting job. He tried to frame it as though they were the real victims here, struggling to make ends meet while I was being difficult and unreasonable. He claimed Amanda hadn't meant to shortchange me, but she had hoped I would understand their situation and let it slide. I listened, but his words only fueled my frustration. When he finished, I told him that while I sympathized with their financial struggles, it didn't excuse Amanda's behavior. She had made a promise and then broken it. If they couldn't afford to pay me, they shouldn't have hired me in the first place. I pointed out that babysitting their 2 kids for an entire day was hard work, and expecting fair compensation for my time and effort wasn't unreasonable. That's when Dave's tone shifted. He became defensive, accusing me of being inflexible and making things harder for everyone. It was clear he expected me to cave under the pressure, but I wasn't about to back down. I told him that their financial issues weren't my responsibility, and if they expected me to work for free, they should have been upfront about it. He left in a huff, clearly annoyed that I wasn't willing to budge. Since then, things have been tense. Amanda isn't speaking to me, which honestly feels like a relief at this point. Update 2. Well, things have taken a surprising and, frankly, amusing turn since the last time I updated. A few days after the whole incident with Dave showing up at my apartment, I got a call from someone I wasn't expecting, Amanda's friend, Lisa. Lisa and I aren't particularly close, but we've interacted at family events and gatherings where Amanda brought her friends along. So when her name popped up on my phone, I was curious enough to answer, and boy, am I glad I did. Lisa, as it turns out, had some juicy tea to spill. Apparently, Amanda had been venting about the unpaid babysitting fiasco to her mom group chat. I can only imagine how Amanda framed it because, knowing her, I'm sure she left out the part about promising to pay me $150 and instead spun it into a sob story about her ungrateful sister who refused to help her out of the goodness of her heart. But here's the kicker, instead of getting the sympathy she was clearly fishing for, the other moms actually sided with me. Lisa told me that one of the moms flat out called Amanda exploitative, and another chimed in to say that expecting family to work for free isn't just unfair, it's downright entitled. Naturally, this didn't sit well with Amanda. She apparently blew up in the group chat, accusing Lisa of meddling and the other moms of not understanding how family dynamics work. Lisa, bless her, had the backbone to tell Amanda that it doesn't matter if I'm her sister, if she promised to pay me for a job, she should have followed through. This little exchange didn't end well, and Amanda has been stewing about it ever since. She's now furious with Lisa for betraying her and has likely been complaining to anyone who'll listen. I couldn't help but laugh when Lisa relayed all of this. It's one thing for Amanda to argue with me about fairness, but when her own peers call her out? Chef's kiss. But wait, it gets better. A few days after Lisa's call, I got another update, though this one was indirectly from Amanda. Apparently, Mia and Jack have been enthusiastically showing off their new vocabulary at daycare. From what I heard through the grapevine, aka my mom, who couldn't resist calling me to tisk-tisk about the mess I'd created, it started with Mia casually dropping one of her not baby words during snack time. The other kids, naturally, were curious and started asking what it meant. When the daycare staff overheard, they were horrified and immediately pulled Mia aside. If that wasn't bad enough, Jack, being the energetic little parrot that he is, chimed in with another inappropriate gem during story time the very next day. By this point, the daycare staff couldn't ignore it. Amanda was called in for a meeting about her children's language, and according to my mom, the staff wasn't exactly subtle about their disapproval. They stressed the importance of fostering a respectful and age-appropriate environment, which is daycare code for, your kids are teaching the other kids things they shouldn't know. To make matters even more entertaining, the daycare incident quickly became the talk of the parent community. You know how these things go, one mom mentions it to another, and before you know it, everyone's whispering about how Amanda's kids are that family. It didn't take long for Amanda's embarrassment to reach a boiling point. True to form, she texted me, absolutely livid, blaming me for what she called the humiliation she had to endure. According to her, the daycare staff and other parents now see her as a bad mom, and it's all my fault. She even had the audacity to suggest that I should have known better than to teach her kids inappropriate words, as though this entire situation wasn't a direct result of her trying to stiff me in the first place. I didn't waste much time crafting a response. I simply reminded her, in no uncertain terms, that none of this would have happened if she just paid me what she owed in the first place. Predictably, she didn't take that well. She accused me of being cold-hearted and vindictive, and then proceeded to lecture me on how my actions have consequences. Oh, the irony. What Amanda doesn't seem to grasp is that I didn't set out to ruin her reputation or make her life harder. I simply decided that if she wasn't going to value my time and effort, I wasn't going to go out of my way to ensure her kids had a squeaky clean experience. The fallout from that decision? That's on her. If she had just handed me the agreed-upon $150 at the end of the first babysitting job, this entire chain of events wouldn't exist. But no, she decided to treat me like a doormat, and now she's dealing with the consequences. Update 3. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Last night, while I was minding my own business and trying to relax, there was a knock at my door. Given everything that's happened recently, my immediate thought was, oh great, what now? I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the peephole and, to my surprise, saw Amanda standing there. She looked annoyed, but not in her usual performative way. This was different. She looked like she'd been simmering in frustration all day and had finally hit her breaking point. I opened the door, and before I could say a word, Amanda thrust an envelope into my hand. Her expression was a mix of anger and resignation, and she practically spat out, "Here. Now stop messing with my kids." I opened the envelope and saw $130 in cash, the exact amount she still owed me from the first babysitting gig. For a moment, I just stared at the money, almost in disbelief that she was finally doing what she should have done weeks ago. I looked up at her and calmly said, "This could have been avoided if you just kept your word in the first place." Amanda's face twisted into a scowl, but she didn't respond. She turned on her heel and walked away without another word, leaving me standing in my doorway, holding the money that had caused so much unnecessary drama. I couldn't help but feel a mix of vindication and amusement. She had finally caved, not because she wanted to make things right, but because she was desperate to regain control of a situation that had spiraled far beyond her expectations. But the real kicker came the next day. I was lounging on my couch when my phone buzzed with a call. I glanced at the screen and saw Mia's name. Amanda had given her a kid-friendly smartwatch with a calling feature, and Mia occasionally used it to call me when she wanted to tell me about her day or ask random questions. I answered, expecting her usual cheerful chatter, but what came out of her mouth had me laughing so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Mia, in her sweet, innocent voice, said, "Aunt Michelle, Mommy said you're annoying, but I think she's being hypocritical." I was speechless for a moment before I burst out laughing. The sheer audacity of this 5-year-old calling her mom out with a word I'd apparently introduced her to was too much. It wasn't just what she said, it was the tone, the delivery, the absolute conviction behind it. Mia clearly didn't fully understand the weight of the word hypocritical, but she'd used it correctly, and that made it even funnier. I managed to compose myself long enough to ask her why she thought her mom was being hypocritical. Mia explained, in her roundabout, 5-year-old way, that Amanda had been telling her not to use grown-up words, but Amanda herself had been saying not nice words about me. Apparently, Amanda had been muttering under her breath about how I was annoying and difficult, and Mia, being the observant little sponge that she is, had picked up on it. Mia's logic was simple: if Mommy could say not nice words, then why couldn't she? After the call, I sat there, still chuckling, and thought about how much Amanda must be regretting this entire ordeal. Not only had she been publicly called out by her mom group and embarrassed at daycare, but now her own kids were armed with just enough vocabulary and context to challenge her authority in the most hilariously awkward ways. The irony was delicious, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. Later that day, I got a text from Amanda, though it was surprisingly short and to the point. She informed me that I was officially banned from babysitting Mia and Jack. She didn't elaborate, but it didn't take a genius to figure out why. She probably realized that every interaction I had with her kids was a potential risk for further damage to her carefully curated parenting image. Honestly, the ban was fine by me. Babysitting those two had already caused more drama than it was worth, and I wasn't exactly eager to put myself in a position where Amanda could exploit me again. But here's the funny thing, even though I'm no longer babysitting, the ripple effects of my previous interactions with Mia and Jack are still very much in play. From what I've heard through family gossip, Amanda is struggling to undo the lessons her kids have learned. Mia, in particular, has taken a liking to calling people out whenever she senses any kind of inconsistency or unfairness. Amanda can't even get through a simple disagreement without Mia chiming in with a pointed observation or, on occasion, a perfectly timed, grown-up word. Jack, meanwhile, has become the unfiltered echo, repeating whatever he hears, whether it's from me, Mia, or Amanda herself. The daycare situation hasn't improved much either. Amanda had to send an email apologizing to the other parents after Mia dropped yet another inappropriate word during circle time. Apparently, the other kids thought it was hilarious, and now there's a small subset of toddlers who've started experimenting with their vocabulary at home. Amanda has been mortified, but she hasn't dared to mention it to me again after our last exchange. The way I see it, this whole situation could have been avoided if Amanda had simply honored her original agreement. Instead, she tried to guilt-trip me, shortchange me, and paint me as the bad guy when I stood up for myself. And now, she's reaping the consequences of her actions in the form of two adorably precocious kids who know just enough to make her life a little more complicated. At the end of the day, I don't regret how things played out. Sure, it's caused some tension within the family, and Amanda probably won't be inviting me over for dinner anytime soon, but I've made peace with that. The lesson here is clear: don't mess with your babysitter, especially if your babysitter is your sibling and knows how to get even in the most creative ways possible.